Thursday, I'm actually going to be kind of in the driver's seat a little bit, doing some lessons with you and working a little more directly. So we'll see how that goes. But I wanted to start off here, I guess. First of all, I know that you all watched the episode 3 of The Men Who Built America yesterday. Is that right? Yeah. All right, excellent. And I guess I just wanted to begin by asking, just to get some of your reactions from that. What are some things you thought were interesting? What do you remember from that video that you saw yesterday? What was it about?
Excuse me, I have one more quick announcement. Sign up for after prom inside Mrs. Hines' room. So sign up for after prom inside Miss Hines' room. Thank you.
And on that note, we'll begin. All right. So what do you remember from the video yesterday? Yes.
Henry Frick was a ruthless businessman.
Okay. Okay. So he was mentioned for sure. Yeah, and Beth.
Building the St. Louis Bridge.
Yes. The big bridge over the Mississippi River. One of the first steel structures there. Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Like he was trying to start like a company or like retire on like steel.
Yeah, absolutely. So he was one of the first people who kind of noticed that steel was going to be the next big industry in the United States.
Yeah. He was trying to take on Rockefeller.
Yeah, that was big. So they kind of talked about that competition, the rivalry that took place between the two businessmen. Sure. Anything else? Yeah.
He was mentored by like Tom Scott. Like,
Yeah, so that gets to the concept of all these different industrialists around that were kind of helping each other out. This stuff didn't just occur in kind of the public. Yeah.
he started working with Tom Scott when he was 12.
Okay. Okay, so he was very, very young, a lot younger than a lot of people working today. Maybe. Yeah.
He was Tom Scott's assistant.
Okay. Sure.
Henry Frick didn't really care about anybody else but himself.
Okay, yeah, so he was kind of in it for his own gain. Yeah.
The dam bracelet, because they never would do.
Oh, yeah. That was at the end of the video, right, where they had the dam kind of bursting there. Yeah. Anything else that we can remember from that? Yeah.
Yeah, like the reason it kind of the dam burst open was kind of because he had the roads on top like lower so he could get his carriage across.
So he's not really thinking about that town at the bottom. He's just trying to figure out how do I get my carriage across this area. Yes.
I think it was Johnstown ignored the warning to evacuate.
There's a certain machine that makes steel in 15 minutes than 2 weeks.
Oh yeah, that was what was called the Bessemer process, which really kind of expedited the process to make steel. Yeah. Yeah.
Carnegie couldn't go to school because he had to make a living for his family when he was really young.
Yeah, and that's a big thing that a lot of young people have to do at that time. So with all that in mind, it seems like y'all remember quite a bit from the video, which is excellent. And today, I just wanted to start off by kind of digging a little bit deeper into kind of the life of Andrew Carnegie as a whole, kind of give you some biographical information on a little bit more about who he was. I think the video did a very good job kind of going through his early life, his early forays into the steel industry in particular. But I think this reading gives you a little more idea about kind of the broad aspects of his life in general. So as you're reading, one of the things that I want you to do, I'm going to put a few little instructions for you up here. So I'm actually going to kind of read this to you and insert some comments as we go, but as I'm doing that, what I want you to do in particular is anything you find like interesting, anything interesting or important you should highlight. I want you to highlight or underline that. Anything that you have questions about, or any comments. I want you to note in the margin, so you just write a little note for yourself. And finally, anything that reminds you of the video that you saw yesterday, anything that relates to that, that kind of circles back to that you can recall, I want you to circle that. And if at any point you can't read my writing up here and you need me to remind you what something is, just let me know. I know I'm not the best writer on the marker. Isn't that great? But hopefully that shouldn't be too difficult to just go through here. And the point of that really is so, I'll kind of read this to you, insert some comments here and there, and this way you can kind of focus a little bit more on what's going on and being able to kind of mark things up, because you'll be able to use this then down the road for a little write-up thing we're going to do at the end of this period, and then as well as some stuff we may do later in the week. So it will certainly be useful to you down the road to be able to look through this quickly and kind of find important information here and there. So with that in mind, I'll just begin here. So the Andrew Carnegie biography. Andrew Carnegie was born on November 25th, 1835 in Dunfermline, Scotland. And Scotland is kind of a small country. It's just north of Britain, so on the same island as Britain. It's just so you're kind of aware of the location there. His father was a weaver who made linen for a living, and his mother worked preparing shoes. His family was fairly poor. They lived in a typical cottage in Scotland, which was basically a single room where the family cooked, ate, and slept. When famine swept the land in the 1840s, the family decided to move to America. In 1848, Andrew immigrated to Allegheny, Pennsylvania, in the United States. He was 13 years old. So right here, I'll just stop for a second, we can see that when Andrew Carnegie moved to the United States, he was fairly young, but he was probably around most of your ages, I would imagine, when he came here. So he was certainly old enough to remember what poverty was like in Europe. He was certainly old enough to have a recollection of the hard times that his family went through there. And a lot of those hard times did not end when the Carnegies moved to the United States. They were fairly poor immigrants, but there was certainly a view of this being a fresh start, this being an opportunity to kind of start over and try to do something a little bit different in a different place. And that was the way that a lot of immigrants felt moving from Europe at this time to America. And I'm thinking that, when you grow up in kind of a state of poverty, and then you're able to move somewhere else, you're a little more committed to trying to better yourself in this place. And certainly I think that was something that Carnegie was aware of, and he wanted to become more successful than his parents were and his family were, and kind of rise above that. So moving on here. Since his family needed the money, he immediately went to work in a cotton factory as a bobbin boy. He made $1.20 for working 70 hours a week on his first job. So just to pause here a minute, does anyone know what a bobbin is? This isn't something we really use today. Does anybody have an idea about what that is?
And that's something you put in your hair.
No. What is that?
Something with sewing?
Yeah, it is something with sewing. Absolutely. Yes. So
Like an old fashioned thing.
it's kind of an old-fashioned sewing thing. Yeah. So essentially, what a bobbin was, and you still use them today if you sew, but a bobbin is this metal. It's a metal piece that it's circular, and it's got some holes in it, and they put twine around it or thread or something, and that's used for sewing. Exactly. Yeah. And it was also used, though, in more industrial settings. So this would have been in he would have been a bobbin boy in like a textile factory, so a clothing factory or anything where they're making fabric, and it would have been his job to take these bobbins to these women who were working on looms, making clothing and stuff like that. So he would have kind of been transporting these back and forth, and that would have been his role in that. And at the time, yeah, he certainly did not make a lot of money, as I heard some of you murmuring about. He was not. This was not a get rich quick kind of gig by any means. But moving on here, Andrew wasn't able to attend school, but he was an intelligent and hardworking boy. During his free time, he read books loaned to him from one of the local citizens' private libraries. Andrew never forgot how important these books were to his education and would later donate significant funds to the building of public libraries. So education at this time looked a lot different for people than it does today, especially if you were poor, if you weren't particularly well off. Because chances are that he did not go to a large amount of formal schooling. I think that was mentioned in the video as well. It doesn't really say this explicitly in this little biographical overview, but I would assume that to a large degree he was homeschooled, probably by his mother. She probably tried, at least when he was young, to teach him some important things, but a lot of the learning was done kind of on your own. You read books, and if you were working when you were young, if you were kind of starting out in the business world, you'd probably learn a lot from the adults that you were working around. They were your mentors. They were the people who kind of helped you, and it was important that you listened to them and really understood what they were saying, because these are the people who could help you out down the road. And because he wasn't particularly well off, this isn't just true for the Carnegie family, this is really true for most families at this time. You know, this is before you got child labor laws. I mean, if you were a poor family, you had everybody in that family working. I mean, who could. That was just what you did. And a lot of times the children start out when they were quite young, because that was the situation the family was in. If a lot of time you had the father working in the home, and maybe the mother had a job on the side or something, or maybe they had so many children that couldn't happen. She had to stay home with them, so more of the kids had to work. And that was just kind of how the dynamic worked at this time, which is very different, obviously, than we see today, really. So, continuing along, though, Andrew worked hard, and he did a good job. He soon got a job as a telegraph messenger. This was much better and more enjoyable. Andrew got to run all around town delivering messages. He also studied Morse code and practiced with the telegraph equipment whenever he got the chance. In 1851, at age 16, he was promoted to telegraph operator. Starting in 1853, when Carnegie was around 18 years old, Thomas A. Scott of the Pennsylvania Railroad Company employed him as a secretary at a salary of $4 per week, $120 by 2018 inflation. Does anybody know what inflation is, or can anybody describe that? Yep.
Like blowing up, kind of, not like boom, but like making it bigger. Time period.
Yeah, that's a good explanation, kind of the economic side of what inflation is about. Yeah, so really what this means is that, you know, over time the value of the dollar in the United States has changed. It's kind of inflated. It's gotten bigger. So the value, so in 1853 that was set at $4. But today, that would be $120. So that's why a lot of times when we look at these old monetary figures, and we think that, you know, these people probably didn't get paid a lot, $4 a week, that's not very much. And yeah, you know, today that wouldn't be a lot. I mean, $120 a week is not a lot of money by any means, but it's certainly more than $4. But that's what it appeared as at the time, because $4 was worth a lot more in 1853 than it is right now. So Carnegie accepted the job with the railroad as he saw more prospects for career growth and experience than he did with the telegraph company. So he's recognizing an expanding industry here, an industry that's kind of in its infancy that he thinks is going to grow. At age 24, Carnegie officially became superintendent of the Western Division of the Pennsylvania Railroad. Carnegie then hired his 16-year-old brother, Tom, to be his personal secretary and telegraph operator. Not only did Carnegie hire his brother, but he also hired his cousin, Maria Hogan, who became the first female telegraph operator in the country. As superintendent, Carnegie made a salary of $1,500 a year. His employment by the Pennsylvania Railroad Company would be vital to his later success. The railroads were the first big business in America, and the Pennsylvania was one of the largest of them all. Carnegie learned much about management and cost control during these years, and from Scott in particular. So just to pause for a minute, what are some things so far that you've marked on your articles? What have you written down? Anything in particular? Yeah.
At age 24, Carnegie officially became superintendent of the Western Division of the Pennsylvania Railroad.
Excellent. Yeah, and that kind of calls back to some stuff we saw in the video yesterday too, and work on that. Very good. Anything else that we marked? Anything else that was noted or put down? Yeah.
The railroads were the first big businesses in America.
Yeah, that's been another theme that we've seen throughout those videos we've seen, hasn't it? That those railroads kind of helped all these other industries grow as well. Absolutely. Anything else that we saw that we marked down? All right. Continuing on then. As Carnegie made more money, he wanted to invest his money rather than spend it. He invested in various businesses like iron, bridges, and oil. Many of his investments were successful, and he also made a lot of business connections with important and powerful men. And you know, this holds true today just as it did then. You know, a lot of kind of credo to success is almost, you know, who you know is oftentimes just as important as what you know in a lot of these business endeavors. And all these businessmen, they had connections. They had connections with each other. They helped mentor younger people who were kind of, you know, coming up in the industry. They had certainly people at meetings all the time, just like they do today. And learning from each other, listening to each other, trying to figure out what's going on, and understanding how different industries work, that was just as important then as it is right now in the business world. So that's kind of an important concept that kind of relates back to even things that we see in the modern era with all this same kind of stuff. In 1865, Carnegie established his first company called the Keystone Bridge Company. He began to put most of his efforts into ironworks. Using his connections with the railroad companies, he was able to build bridges like Eads Bridge in St. Louis and sell railroad ties made by his company. He expanded his business over the next several years, building factories throughout the region. Now, if I remember correctly, I didn't think the video really covered, the video we watched yesterday, I didn't think that covered the Keystone Company as well as maybe I would have liked it to. It would have been good if they kind of maybe talked a little bit more about that. But that was the company that Carnegie had founded. That was a company that he was working with prior to his steel endeavors. And that was the company that was contracted to build the big bridge that was discussed in the video yesterday. So that's kind of how he got involved with that process. Carnegie eventually decided to invest in steel. So once again, he recognizes another expanding industry. At first it was the railroads. Now he sees steel as being the future for the kind of American building enterprise. And this is what good business people do. They start noticing trends, they start noticing things before they get big.